300 years ago, on the Lancashire coast, there was a quiet corner filled with busy birds, flapping fish, and fragrant flowers. Unconcerned wildlife skipping across the sandhills, and bobbing beaks on the briny sea. Interrupting this sandy coastline was a small river known as the River Nile. No, not that one. This was more of a tiny trickle than a raging river. Locals joked it was small enough to jump over, although actually boats were able to reach it from the sea, and it was a great place to swim from. In 1792, visitors started arriving on day trips from nearby Churchtown. One lady, Mrs. Walmsley, was so taken by the area that she built a house right on the River Nile, with lovely views of the sandy wilderness and the Irish Sea beyond. This building was the first step along the gradual journey from a natural environment to the town of Southport that we know today. Soon after, Mr. Sutton, an enterprising publican from Churchtown, decided to build a hotel on the other side of the river in order to attract more visitors than he could manage in trips from his pub. Soon, folk from the growing industrial towns of Lancashire were coming to bathe and take in the healthy sea air. More buildings followed, guest houses started popping up, and wealthy individuals built holiday homes amongst the drier sandhills either side of the marshy track to Churchtown. The broad expanse of squishy land explains why Lord Street is so wide today. In 1820, upon the coronation of King George IV, the trodden path from Lord Street to the sea was named Coronation Walk. A year later, Christ Church was added. By the 1830s, this small settlement was starting to shape up smartly, with some houses being developed into shops, and landowners cooperating to organise things into a tidy town. A wide new street, Neville Street, was built which led through the dunes to the sea, providing a perfect space for more businesses to develop. It wasn't all plain sailing. When storms came, Lord Street could be battered by sands and waves. As protection, in 1835, the sandy stretch between Coronation Walk and Neville Street was reinforced with stone and a promenade built on top. A stroll along the prom to enjoy the views cost a penny. A few years later, it was extended north to the Victoria Baths, with a bridge over Neville Street. By 1848, things were getting really exciting. Railways were booming, and investors realised the financial potential of trains full of visitors to Southport. The first railway line steamed in from Liverpool, and a second from Wigan and Manchester, built in 1855, enabled wealthy businessmen to move their families to Southport while retaining easy access to their mills and factories in the industrial towns. These Victorian businessmen had loads of money. They invested it in new ventures to attract visitors to Southport. The very first iron pier designed solely for leisure was built, the longest in Britain, stretching 1,340 metres, that's 12 football pitches. It stretched out to sea over Southport's sandy beach. This time, a penny meant holiday makers could stroll along and look across to Lytham and Blackpool. Though Blackpool's iconic tower was yet to be built, they could even take a day trip to those resorts on a boat from the end of the pier. Inland, things were moving along too. Houses by this point were popping up everywhere. Southport was the place to be. One local landowner donated a patch of sandhills for an elegant park, giving it his own name, Hesketh Park. A road was built around it, and it immediately became a desirable place to build grand houses. While humans were building structures, Mother Nature was making some changes of her own. Crashing waves scooped the sands. The coastline could change dramatically. By building on these sandy expanses, the coastline became more stable. Access to the Nile vanished with the build-up of sand, and the river dried up. Many of the original buildings were demolished in place of new structures. Mr. Sutton's hotel was removed to accommodate the extension of Lord Street towards Birkdale. Development charged on. A new stretch of promenade was built, looping down to Lord Street, where a grand glass house was constructed in 1874, the Winter Gardens. This colossal greenhouse was filled with exotic plants, plus a theatre and an aquarium. It provided an entertainment for tourists when the weather was cold. Now it's important to remember that while all this was going on, the coastline was constantly changing. The sea is gradually retreating overall, with the build-up of sand on the shoreline, though the water would occasionally come all the way up and crash against the promenade. The broad trend of receding sea meant that there was more land to be built on. In 1881, a new section of promenade was added, converting more of the beach into officially dry land and looping down to Hesketh Park. It was boom time in Southport, and a new railway, the Cheshire Line, brought visitors on a scenic route from Liverpool. It provided spectacular views of the coastline, curving across the sands down to the station on busy Lord Street. To prevent the sea from causing damage to the railway, an esplanade was built. A long raised bank keeping the sea away from the tracks, where people could walk or ride in horse-drawn carriages. The land that had been penned in by these structures gradually began to dry out. This provided the opportunity for a park and recreation grounds, with a new road, Rotten Row, along what used to be the beach below the sandhills. The sea continued to retreat, making it more difficult for tourists to appreciate its beauty without a long walk. The town's corporation didn't let this stop them. If the sea was absconding from Southport, they determined to dig a gigantic hole which would trap the water on one of its infrequent high tides. A marine lake was formed, with its own beach for paddling, splashing and sailing. Elegant gardens lined the promenade where the sea no longer reached. Scarisbrick Avenue was built in 1888 to provide direct access from Lord Street. Houses were demolished and bigger ones put in their place. Taller shops, banks and civic buildings appeared as the settlement became a renowned and established town. The first lake proved such a success that another quickly followed. By 1895, the two lakes were merged, securing Southport's place as the leisure destination for the summer. Taming the sea became a local obsession. By 1895, investors were scrambling to back the town's expansion onto the beach with new structures. Marine Drive was built on a raised bank and across the beach to create still more access, connecting the esplanade, lake, pier and prom. The sandy, squelchy land in between became known as the lagoon. At the end of Queen Victoria's rule and the start of the 20th century, Southport was buzzing. There were brash and noisy fairgrounds, helter-skelters and flying machines, and a large pavilion for concerts and entertainments. Birkdale, which had hitherto taken a dim view of being part of the seaside resort, merged with Southport in 1912. More parks, more attractions. A King's Garden opened in 1913 by George V himself. Plus a grand bathing lake the following year, ready just before the onset of the First World War. Even during the war, developments continued. To stabilise the squishy, boggy lagoon, truckloads of household rubbish were dumped into it, soaking up the moisture and creating a solid floor. This created space in the furthest corner for larger fairground rides and outlets of fun which still stand today. The old fairground was closed, creating a more sophisticated expanse between the smart hotels and the more noisy pursuits of the coast. Commemorative features remembering those lost in the war were built, including an obelisk, colonnades, and memorial gardens dedicated to those who had died. The remainder of the now dry lagoon was converted into Prince's Park, complete with Art Deco sea bathing lake reached via a Venetian bridge. Don't forget, 50 years earlier, all this had been under the sea. After World War II, changes hotted up again. The Cheshire Line was closed, big houses vanished, and in the 1960s, the marine lake was extended to make more room for sailing. The sand that had been dug out created islands. In the 1970s, the coastline was fixed. Marine Drive was extended nearly half a mile further out to sea than the promenade on its way to Crossens and Ainsdale. In the 1990s, the sea bathing lake disappeared under Ocean Plaza, with its shops, hotel, entertainments and car parks, covering the old lagoon and the first bathing pool. And so we come to the Southport that we know today, the seaside resort that emerged from the sandhills and the sea, adapting to the local geography, the natural changes, and the impact of its residents and visitors. The evidence of the town's development is still there in its urban layout, and the sand is under your feet when you walk the streets.